When it comes to creating suspense in a story, Alfred Hitchcock once said that it is made when you provide an audience with a certain amount of information. For example, when two characters are sitting at a table having a discussion, and suddenly they blow up, it would be a boring and then shocking for one moment kind of scene. But then, if you show the audience beforehand that there is a bomb underneath their table that is going to go off, the audience suddenly becomes a lot more emotionally invested into the scene, and it leaves a greater lasting impact. This is something that the writers at Respawn Entertainment seem to have taken note of, because these same elements can be seen in the story of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. First of all, there's the figurative characters talking at a table, which in this case is the objective to rebuild the Jedi Order. The reason for the characters to travel to several different planets and to follow the journey of Eno Cordova is to repair what the Empire destroyed and save the galaxy. It's a story that on its own would probably be generic and maybe even a little boring. But then there's the figurative bomb under the table that creates the emotional reaction from the player, which in this case is the original Star Wars trilogy. Obviously within those movies there is no Jedi Order, which means that the characters in this game have to fail when they try to rebuild it. No matter what happens, we know that the characters will not win. And this creates suspense because we know at some point in this story, something bad will happen. But then it goes a step further, because unlike other prequel stories in which we know what will happen by the end, Jedi Fallen Order sets up its story so that we know what will not happen. For example, in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, we know that Anakin will become Darth Vader. And in maybe Rogue One, we know that the rebels will steal the Death Star plans. When we know what will happen, a lot of tension is lost. But in Fallen Order, we know that the characters will not rebuild the Order, but there are a lot of different ways that these characters can fail that allows for many possible outcomes. The characters could potentially be killed, they could give up, be turned to the dark side, they could lose the holocron, get the children on the list killed by the Empire, destroy the holocron, or maybe even they'll never find it in the first place. That is what creates suspense in this story. The fact that even though we know what will happen later in the greater Star Wars story, we have no idea what's going to happen in this smaller one. And that is why you would feel a sense of suspense throughout the story, because everything you do in it, leading up to the end, is ultimately useless. And it's that waiting for the end, waiting for that bad thing to happen, and not knowing exactly what it's going to be or what kind of effect it'll have on the characters that creates the suspense. And that is how suspense is applied to the story on a larger scale, but I think it's also worth mentioning its use on a smaller scale. Specifically, the Order 66 flashback contains all of the same principles, but in a more concentrated form. This flashback starts unlike any other, in Cal's bedroom, and you have to walk to the training room while casually conversing with the clones along the way. This is the people talking at the table part of the scene, the part that seems mundane and boring on its own, but is made uneasy by the bomb about to go off part of it, which in this case would be the clone troopers and the upcoming Order 66. When you get to the training room, the camera cuts to show Jaro Tapal in his observation room, but more importantly the clone trooper that accompanies him. The player is forced to complete the training session, still with a great feeling of unease due to the upcoming Order 66 and the inability to see Jaro Tapal very well. Once again, we know that the characters in this instance are going to fail, we just don't know how or when they will. Which is why the clone commander firing at you is very frightening, even though it's just a part of the training session and was even referenced earlier in the scene.
Ready for a rematch later?
At the end, you make it to the door to the observation room, which has to be interacted with in order to open. This is a very intentional choice that is meant to create suspense over what will be in the next room, but going through it reveals that everything still appears to be normal, at least for the moment. After letting the tension build for so long, Order 66 finally happens, but some of the tension still remains because we know that Jaro Tapal will not survive, and the players are now left to wonder how and when he will lose his life. The rest of the flashback involves the player escaping the ship while constantly witnessing events that could potentially lead to the death of Master Tapal, the most frightening of which involves you letting him into a trap while you can only watch. In the end, what this story does is guarantee failure to create suspense. The main characters will fail in their journey, but we are left to wonder how, when, and to what extent they will fail. And even though the characters do fail in achieving their main goal, they still succeed in another form. Jaro Tapal failed to survive, but succeeded in saving his student. And the main crew failed to rebuild the Order, but succeeded in protecting the children on the list. And that's the message of this story after all. that failure is not the end, but a necessary part of the journey. Failure can be used to your advantage, even if you are destined to fail from the start.